see, we haven't even started and we're already smiling, laughing, having a good time. Welcome to another episode of Better Humans at Work. I'm really excited because today I'm joined by someone I'm lucky enough to call a friend, John Graham. Welcome. So before we dive in, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about John. John's professional passion is helping global companies uncover who they are at their core through award-winning employer brand and employee value proposition development. Graham has discovered innovative ways to bring the humanity of employee stories to life. As a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner and culture transformation consultant, his work centers on improving the lived experiences of marginalized employee populations through bleeding-edge approaches that disrupt the status quo and create equitable and inclusive environments. Graham has been featured in publications such as Forbes, USA Today, and the New York Times for his work in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and is listed in the Canvas 2021 Top 100 DEI Leaders to Follow. And his best-selling book, Plantation Theory, The Black Professional Struggle Between Freedom and Security, has been featured in fireside chats, book clubs, and made required reading by executives at companies such as Google, LinkedIn, Panasonic, and more. So that's just a little bit about John. You got a lot going on, don't you, brother? I'm glad you're here with us today.
I am so happy to be here, Sertrice, and thank you for having me. It's always good to connect.
Yes. So I am so excited to be able to tell everyone a little bit about you. But before I dive in with my questions, I know some things I want to follow up on, but just give us a quick update. What's been going on? You know, what's like the main thing you got right now? I know it was hard to even get you here. We've been trying to have him on Better Humans at Work for months, and we finally got you here.
And I apologize. Yes, we've been super busy. A lot of speaking engagements and just getting a lot more space and airtime for plantation theory and the conversations and dialogues that need to be had. That there was a lot of fear around having, even in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and these courageous conversations and cultures of open forum conversations and dialogues. But digging into the history and connecting the dots between modern day history and modern day lived experiences is certainly, I think, more needed now than ever. So yeah, it's been a lot of that, working with clients to help improve their lived experiences of marginalized employees within the organization. So it's consulting, talks, all those good things keeping me busy. By the way, family and life as well. So yeah,
all the things. I was gonna pull my book up, but it's hiding down there. I should have had it ready to go. I feel bad now, but yeah,
I know
it's such a powerful book. And it's something that I know when I took the time to read it, it resonated with me and hit in a different way. Because I've seen, people who aren't Black who read it and then they leave comments and they're like, oh, I learned so much and I can see the experience. But even for me, as someone who I've told the story, you and I have had this conversation before where, I lived in New York some when I was a kid, but when I got to my more formative years, I spent a lot of time around white people. I was in very predominantly white, and notice I'm not saying like, oh, I'm just non-Black. No, it was predominantly white areas. And that, I hadn't really been able to come to terms with my Blackness. And that's been a journey I've been experiencing a bit more over the past few years. And so finding this book around that time, it just hit a little different for me. And it was great. And being able to chat with you about that was really great. So I just want to reiterate one more time how much I personally enjoy the experience of reading your book.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's, to your point, the response, the reaction, the impact it's had is still, mind-blowing and overwhelming for me because, these are things that, and I ask questions a lot of times to dig into areas that we often are aware of, but we don't consciously question, right? Mm-hmm. And there's I think a value in just spending time in these positions of discomfort and examining our own either witting or unwitting participation in the construct we're all in. So I really appreciate and that means the world to hear the impact there. Yeah, but
of course.
But let's not kill the lead here. you have an amazing book out as well right now.
I do.
Yeah.
That was another fun thing, was being able to chat with you throughout the process of becoming an author. And that was something in itself, taking the time to, do all the research, write the things. Thankfully, I don't know how you did it all by yourself. I have my wonderful 2 co-authors there to help me along that path. But the journey of authorship.
It's a whole journey. And, you get to really see how, the thoughts that came from your head into this page and being consumed by other people can take on a life of its own, and people find meaning in things that even maybe you might not have been consciously aware of as you wrote it. But that's the beauty of other people's lived experiences coming into contact with your own. And it's this thought. It really.
So I don't know about you, but I have had a couple of times where people will either share a post with a quote, or when talking to me, they'll be like, "Oh, this one line," and they like read back something. Have you got any of that? And are there any that come to mind that you're like, yeah, this is something that people either, maybe it's a chapter, maybe it's an overall theme, but what's something that has resonated with your readers that you hear about?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I do the fireside chats, it's usually with a moderator who's read the book, and their line of questions and talk track is based on things in the book that really made an impact on them, or made them pause, or put the book down for like a week because they had to absorb it and come back to it. But a lot of times it comes, the consistent ones are the conversation around code switching, the very first chapter in the book. The notions of the things that we have to navigate as Black professionals on a daily basis, minute by minute, that white folks or power dominant majority folks would never even think about. And so when it comes down to EEOC cases and that whole experience, I've been shocked to see how many people have had to go through it, right? When they file discrimination suits against the companies they work in, and the process that comes along with that, there's more people you would think than you would think who've gone through that traumatic experience, right? And so, for I think it was a PhD professor at Harvard who posted literally the screenshot of an excerpt from the book, and then she created like this equation out of it and posted and tagged me on LinkedIn. And I'm like, mind blown. I'm like, people are getting theorems out of some of the things I'm talking about. Like, this is wild, and
you're like,
oh. So yeah, it's certainly awe-inspiring to see how people receive and then relate back to the work that you've done.
Yeah, and I want to give one quick shout out to it's something that is bringing people together who are also doing this work, and I love how much we can connect. And so one person that I know comes to mind, and I've seen people kind of talk about it together, and to your point of EEOC, is Jackie Abram and her book Hush Money, and the power behind that of, it is technically fictional, but it's based on experiences she went through. And so seeing how how a person can go through that process, seeing how it's impacting people who are like, wow, this is really what that can be, seeing the negativity that also she encounters and how she gracefully manages that situation as well. So just a quick shout out to Jackie, because that's another great book that people can kind of get both of them, pair them together.
And a lot of people do. And I love Jackie for her journey and how she's turned pain into power, right? Like, she has really brought a voice that so many didn't have and didn't feel confident enough to bring into into vocalization. So yes, shouts out to Jackie, her entire team, network of supporters, for sure. Hush Money is a tremendous book.
Yeah. I need to read it.
Yeah, both Hush Money. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to do a quick check. Your audio is a little weird on my side all of a sudden. I'm not sure. I was trying to ping a person. I'm like, hey, double check. Let me know.
Okay.
But just do a quick check. Just a little choppy. But While you check on that, though, I wanted to pivot us. So I love the book, and I know that was in your bio. Another piece of your bio, actually, let me find the words again because I was like, it was the phrase where you said when you talk about like the bringing the employee stories to life, and you talked about your bleeding edge approaches, and I was like, okay, go on. I know you have a survey that is something that you use with your clients. And so I want to hear more about that and tell people, because I know when you first told me, I was like, it's really, like you said, innovative and a different approach that people often overlook. We ignore the employee voice, and this is a great way to get into that. So tell us more.
Well, thank you. Yeah, hopefully my audio is better now. It's close out some things. But either way, yeah. So when I left corporate America to go into consulting full time at Shaker Recruitment Marketing, I saw a massive gap between the employer brand industry and function, which is, to articulate and express an internal culture to attract, engage, and retain talent, and the DEI function in the industry itself, right? So you have all of this amazing work from a structural and behavioral standpoint to help shape culture, and this other function whose job it is to express the culture, but they don't talk, right? They're not synonymously working or synchronistically working to not only shape but also articulate and give feedback back to the other so that you can improve. And so I was like, well, I really believe that those two worlds should be brought together. And so the merging of DEI and employer brands, so that companies develop this brand articulation of who they are as an employer through data-backed approaches, but infusing and incorporating or embedding DEI into the process of developing your brand, so that you're not selling a false narrative just by tacking on a bunch of diverse imagery and the latest trending buzzwords in your messaging, and calling that diverse, equitable, or inclusive. And so one of my first milestones, I'll say, as a result of going into consulting full time, was I developed a survey instrument that sought to go where engagement surveys have never gone before. I knew that was a consistent tool being used internally at companies to sort of get a sense check or a pulse on what their culture was, how people are experiencing the organization. Do they, right? And the DEI questions were like maybe 3 to 5 questions that really were high level surface. Do you feel heard? Do you feel like you have a voice? How are we delivering on diversity? I'm like, okay, none of those questions are actually focused on me as a respondent, right? Do I feel heard? Okay, but in what sense? Do you feel like the company is giving me? So it's this kind of implicit value proposition that always lands on the employer benefit side, but not necessarily the employee. So I was like, let's start asking the questions that aren't being asked by the people who, by most stats, are the most marginalized, have the higher attrition rates, and are being sought after to join companies. And I'm like, if you as an organization don't know the answers as to why those who are currently at your organization don't tell the people in their network to join them in your organization, then how can you create a brand to go out and attract people from these very communities who are underrepresented in your organization and have any sense of honest and accurate portrayal of what they experience? And so I then developed the survey, the lived experience survey, which literally quantifies the marginalized lived experience in contrast to their majority counterparts. And so a lot of people ask me, okay, well, does that just mean you deploy the survey to marginalized talent only? And the answer is no, because we want to get a a comparator, right? So that you can see that these particular groups, and we break it out by like 4 different demographics. So it's based on race, gender, disability status, and sexual orientation, right? And we opt never to ask questions that would lead back to identification. So there's nothing like what function or what site you're working at or anything like that, because we want to encourage confidence in anonymity, right?
Yeah.
And the results that we've been getting have been mind-blowing, right? Eye-opening. And when you look at the question set across three specific core focus areas, which are representation, authenticity, and development, representation is not just numerical representation at peer and leadership level, but also environment. And if we think about what implications that is for like coming back to work, right? And you've got a lot of companies now trying to figure out their hybrid policy, several days in, several days out, full remote, whatever. If you don't understand the nuances specifically around marginalized talent experiences being in your offices and why they don't want to come back, well, now you're making a policy that induces, again, anxiety, mental health and wellness issues, physical health issues, lack of psychological safety, and so much more.
Yeah.
These kinds of things get uncovered in that section. In the authenticity section, we're talking about psychological safety, mental health, well-being, accountability, cultural identity, expression, and more, and tapping into some of these psychological dimensions that no engagement survey would ever get into.
Right.
Because no ask.
One of the things I love about your point is that you are, it is so much bigger than just a couple of questions, because a question I often get when clients come and we're talking and we talk about our product, we have the Mattingly Inclusion and Belonging Assessment. It's the whole process. And we're like, yeah, you have your executive interviews, you have your survey, it has like 30 some, I don't remember, 36 items and then like 12 demos, something like that. And then the focus groups, right, to get even more qualitative data. And we're explaining this whole process. And then I'm always met with this question either before, after, during this conversation of, well, we have an engagement survey. Do we really need a second survey? And I'm like, I mean, if you can't get it, then yes, your 3 questions on your engagement survey is better than nothing. I'm never going to say no to data, but you're missing so much if you don't go that extra step in having something like this lived experience survey or some other DEI, like something to get at all of those other layers. Because just asking the one question about belonging, like your valued, respected, seen, heard, whichever point, and then like maybe one behavioral based question, like you're missing so much of the conversation, and that in itself is the point, right? So in ours, what we're getting at is we ask, we talk about belonging, and so there's a number of those questions from how are you feeling, because feelings matter, but then there's also the point of what are you doing. So we think about inclusion as behaviors, so you need behavioral based questions. Is your leader using inclusive language? Is your leader like asking for your opinion? Is your leader involving you in conversations? Are your coworkers doing X, Y, and Z? So like digging into those, getting it, like you said in yours, getting into authenticity, psychological safety, to dig. There's so many layers. I'll just say, like, yes, everything you're talking about, it's so much deeper. And no, your engagement survey, that's more so focused on like, can you be productive? Are you going to leave in 12 months? Like, that's not the whole picture. You're missing so much.
Yeah, I love that point, Sertrice. And one of so there's a couple of questions, I'll be honest, that when we go through the question, the item set with clients, there's like at least 3 questions that give them pause to the point of, ooh, I don't know if we're ready yet, right? And you'll appreciate this. One of the questions is, has your company hosted a happy hour or workplace event at a predominantly Black venue? Now, it's a question. It's a question that nobody's ever been asked before, right? And so the immediate pause that's given by, let's say, white female HR leaders or CHRO is based on the fact 2 things. One, centering Blackness is still very much a shocker, right? And it's almost like the third rail in certain cases, because you can't center Blackness. You can center everyone else, but Black is still a little iffy. But then the other question is, well, why is that relevant? I mean, why? Well, then I probe and I say, well, have you ever been to a happy hour or workplace outing at a Irish pub? They'll be like, yeah, what about a Mexican cantina? Sure, an Italian restaurant maybe? How about a Japanese sushi house? And all of them are resoundingly yeses. Well, yeah, why? Well, that is so easy and acceptable for you to say without question, but when I say Black venue, something is triggered psychologically, unconsciously, that you haven't even wrestled with the fact that, well, I wouldn't feel comfortable in a predominantly Black venue, or I don't know any because I don't go into any in my normal outside of work life, personal life, or I would fear for the safety and concern for whatever in the areas where those venues might be. Well, then, even by that admission, what you're saying is that you would feel uncomfortable, so your discomfort is prioritized over other people's comfort. And that's the psychological underpinnings of that question, which when they understand that, they're like, oh, I never even thought about the venues we choose for seemingly innocuous workplace gatherings might not be comfortable for people who are not in the majority. Now you have an opportunity to spread the responsibility of where venues, or who chooses venues, who's comfortable, and make it, make it an opportunity for other people to have input. So, that's just one example of things that we're uncovering that are giving people an opportunity to think differently.
Yeah. And I think one of the things connected to what you're saying, and one of the things connected to data, is like, what is your why? That's what I always bring people back to when they're going to collect data is, why are you collecting this data? And what are you trying to get out of it? And so that usually helps the data collection sit a little, well, one, it helps you figure out what questions you even need to ask, what you need to be looking at. But, someone, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but someone like who's wanting to improve the experiences of their underrepresented groups, particularly the Black community, like, this would be a useful tool for them. And so then if they ask the question of like, well, why are these questions? Well, you said you want to do this. This is your why. This is how that connects back to your why. And so always remembering that, and to help pull that fear of data out is like, well, if you want to do this, this was your why. We need to know this because that'll help us with the next steps.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you have to be very, very clear on what your intended outcomes are. Right? I mean, this is a scientific process. So you walk in with a hypothesis, and now you get to prove this, right? So the fear of data also comes with legal, right?
Yes.
Data can be discoverable in discrimination lawsuits, and that's what gets most, legal functions very conservative about who sees data, what data is collected, and so forth. And so you do it under attorney-client privilege, but it's overwhelmingly been proven that having that data to support decisions you make to bring culture change actually protects you. So,
yeah. Well, and it's not even just proven. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not gonna say this is legal advice, but I always make this comment of I did have to study disparate impact and so on in school, and the law, for better, for worse, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's on the organization side. As long as they are showing in good faith that they are addressing these things, then it's fine. So it's not just collecting the data. The data is the first step. You do need to have the data. Let's say a discrimination case came. You would need the data anyway. So I always make that comment, like you're going to need it before or after. And then what's more important, though, is what are your actions because of that data? What are you doing as a result? Because you're right. If you show you're having some issues with your data, but you're not doing anything to fix it, now you're an issue. Now you have a problem. That lawsuit coming and you need to look out. But if you can show that you're putting in the work, then the thing you're afraid of is what you would need in that case in the first place.
Yep. But then again, there's still human error involved, right? And human insecurity involved, yes. more importantly, because a lot of this is resoundingly attached to the insecurity of those who are in a privileged or higher status or power position, right? The fear of losing power, privilege, and status drives some of these protective, conservative, exclusionary behaviors because they themselves are afraid of either being exposed or being without or in the out group or being otherized in some way, shape, or form. But a lot of it is just not wanting to be accountable for their own shit, to be honest, that they have not reckoned and dealt with. And so we have to examine that. I push a lot of my clients at the executive level to really be honest about what is, of course we'll talk about power, we'll talk about privilege, but that thing that lies right in between is insecurity. Well, what are you afraid of losing? Who are you afraid of upsetting in the process of sustainable change for those who are marginalized? Are your fears rational? Do you have any evidence to showcase or a track record of those who have made these attempts to change and a negative outcome? Well, a lot of times you get to the root of this and it's like, well, no. What do we talk? Well, I'm just not comfortable. Well, okay, let's address that. Because your discomfort as an individual is making decisions for thousands of people in your organization.
Yes.
Let's address what's really hindering progress. And it's not a lack of data. It's not legal. It's you. So let's address that.
Oh, preach. Always dropping knowledge, John. I love it. We are getting a little bit far on, so I do have one more question before we get ready to wrap up today. This is our favorite question that we like to ask people who join us on the show. So what do you think organizations need to do to improve the human experience at work? We've talked about some already, but
I was gonna say, how much time do we have left? Well,
give me your clip.
The Cliff Notes version. So I mean, honestly, we need to examine the construct itself. And when I say the construct, I mean this shell of organizational practices and behaviors that were designed hundreds of years ago, void of humanity themselves. Right? This is still very much high profitability, high productivity, low cost and overhead. The model at base level has not changed in over 600 years. So as long as that is the driver, then humanity is a secondary consideration. What I suggest is if you want to make things more human, you have to really examine and be clear on not only the impacts of decisions, sure, but also who's involved in making the decisions and who's not. Right? Humanity necessitates, right, a certain level of consideration for basic human needs, survival, love, all of those things, Maslow's hierarchy. But when it comes to business decision making, all of that stuff goes out the window, and it's really cold and calculated. That's by design. And so if we really want to examine humanity and bringing it back into the workplace, maybe we need to thoroughly look at whether this construct is still serving humanity.
Yeah.
And if it was. So.
No, I think that's such a good point. And we talk about that in scientific spaces, like I, as psychologists, is just like construct clarity. What are we, that's the term. What is it that you're talking about in the first place? And what does it truly mean? And I think so often it's really easy just to fall into that default of, well, it's always been this way. This is what it is. And times have changed from 10 years ago, from 50 years ago, from 100 years ago to 500 years ago, right? Like we could keep going. There's so much. And there are so many things ingrained in our culture, workplace specifically, but broadly as well, right? That are just like historical. It's just there. It's legacy from before, but that doesn't mean it can't be better, right? If you think back, we wouldn't have phones, we wouldn't have computers, we wouldn't have running water. Like there's so many things. If everyone throughout life had that mindset, right, we'd still be living in caves. So it's okay. Progress is okay, and it helps us.
Preach.
Oh, good. Well, John, thank you again. I'm so glad we met once upon a time it was so funny. Met on Clubhouse, was also introduced someone else, and we finally connected. And so glad that I have you in my life. Someone I consider, like I said, a friend, but also a mentor. I look up to you. So appreciate that you're here. Don't make that face at me. I can give you your flowers. And so appreciate you joining us today. And thank you everyone who is watching either live or watching the replay. And be sure to connect with John if you want to learn more about what he has going on. Check out the book, Plantation Theory, and bring him in for a chat. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Appreciate you. Thank you.